Let's look at what else has been making headlines this week. To do that, we are joined in the studio by Associate Professor Ian Kemish, former diplomat and author. Ian, great to have you back again in the studio.
Great to be here.
Let's start off with this article in Deutsche Welle, and this is the announcement that the Chinese President Xi Jinping will make a visit to Russia next week. Now, this news comes at the same time as the International Criminal Court has issued an arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin for alleged war crimes. The optics of this, what do you make of it?
Yeah, there's no sign yet, is there, that Xi Jinping has been deterred by this strengthening of the sense of Vladimir Putin as international pariah. Look, I think that China is presenting itself as peacemaker here. There has been some earlier contact last week at foreign minister level with Ukraine. And of course there's some scepticism about that in Western capitals. You know, we only have to think about the fact that China has refused to condemn the invasion of Ukraine. Just think back to the aggression that China has shown in relation to Taiwan in very recent times. There's naturally a bit of scepticism in Western capitals. But the point is that it's not the West that the China is seeking to convince. It's what we might describe as the global south. It's the term we often use in diplomatic circles. In other words, the group of non-aligned countries, the developing world. That, I think, is who Xi Jinping is reaching for. In the end, you know, China's prestige rests significantly on the support of that very large group of nations, a group of nations who don't want to choose a side in this conflict, and a group of nations that China looks to for its natural resources to fuel its economy and to strengthen its broader international position. So we in the West, while we might be sceptical and have good reason to be, need to be careful not to lock ourselves into an echo chamber on this, in my view. And it will be interesting to see what happens.
Is there any possibility in that Xi is going there with a peace plan? I mean, that he has already, or the Chinese government has already sort of mooted a peace plan. But really, do you think that will be on the table when he talks to President Putin?
I think that there will at least be some optics around this visit that positions Xi as having sought to bring some constructive ideas around peace to the table. Whether Putin really wants that is another question.
But he wants China.
He certainly wants China. He certainly wants China. So it's a delicate balancing act. Let's not forget that this is a relationship, not a relationship of equals. China is very much the significant party in this conversation, and Putin will be looking to keep Xi happy.
Interesting, so interesting.
Very, very interesting. We could talk about it for many, many more moments. But let's move on to this article out of ABC. And this is about TikTok. I mean, we're seeing TikTok being banned by governments around the world. And this is about the potential bans in Australia. Bring us some of your insights into how government phones are monitored as they stand at the moment.
Well, I think back to my very early days as a junior diplomat, and this is quite a long time ago. You know, we learnt things even then about how personal phones, personal devices can be used by other parties. Some people find it a bit insulting. You go and call on an ambassador and you're asked to leave your phone and your iPad and everything locked up outside. But it's not about what you might do with the phone, it's what others might do with the phone. And bring it forward a generation, a couple of decades, and there really is concern that this kind of software can be used to access really important data. TikTok, I'm no IT guy, but TikTok does stand accused of collecting more information than other social media platforms. And there is concern that its Chinese owners are potentially subject to the influence and instruction of the Chinese state. And that's why, you know, now the EU, Canada, New Zealand and the United States have banned the use of TikTok on government-owned devices. Australia hasn't yet, but the states of Australia seem to be looking to the feds to make a decision about this so we can move forward. Look, I think we live in a world where the division between state and cyber criminality is blurred. We have heard a lot from Australian officials in the course of the last year about Russia in particular as a home of cyber criminality. And we also have had our own experience in this country, think Optus, think Medibank, of how this can impact ordinary Australians. So it needs to be taken seriously and not dismissed.
Well, it clearly is now that they're considering these bans. We want to talk to you about the AUKUS deal. That was last week's news, but taking the story forward, the criticism we heard from a former Prime Minister of Penny Wong and how diplomatic relations are done, and we thought we'd take this opportunity with your expertise and knowledge to look at an article on that and what you made of the criticism by a former Prime Minister of a sitting Prime Minister and his Foreign Secretary.
Well, look, it's been pretty unedifying, frankly. I mean, the whole discussion around this, to have a former Prime Minister launching personal attacks on current government leaders and on the media in this way, it's not a great spectacle. On the other hand, there seems to be a view in some circles that to question or to want to debate the AUKUS deal is somehow a sign of disloyalty. So it's all been a bit messy, I think. I have to say that that Paul Keating's comments about the Pacific and about Penny Wong struck a bit of a chord with me.
Before we get into them, let's just hear a little bit of what Paul Keating had to say.
Running around the Pacific Islands with a lei around your neck handing out money, which is what Penny does, is not foreign policy. It's a consular task, fundamentally. Foreign policy is what you do with the great powers, what you do with China, what you do with the United States. This government, the Albanese government, does not employ foreign policy.
So why did that strike a chord with you?
Well, there's a couple of themes in that I recognise from a long time ago. I recognise as old kind of thinking about Australian foreign policy. At one level, this sense that the only important foreign engagement is with the major powers, the sort of big power diplomacy stuff. I've always thought of that, frankly, as a bit of a craven view of Australian diplomacy, this sense that it's only important if you're dealing with one of the big guys. In the end, the neighbourhood is fundamentally important to us. Its security, its prosperity is key to our own security and prosperity. If you want to think about the Pacific in only defensive terms, and I don't, I see lots of opportunity there, then think of it like this. These are actually very big countries. When you think about them in terms of their maritime zones, in terms of the amount of space on the planet that they occupy, they're significant countries. Their decisions about who they engage with determines the geostrategic picture in our environment. Transnational crime, drugs, again, if you want to think about it in
climate
defensive
change.
terms, and climate change. In the end, what happens in the Pacific presages the experience for the rest of us.
And we've actually had to see Australia make up lost ground in that area because of that way of thinking in the past.
Absolutely. And look, I personally think that the kind of engagement we have seen in very recent times is significantly better in quality because it seeks to understand the perspective of the people in the Pacific. And just quickly, the other thing that I can't help mentioning is, this sense of consular work being something that you dismiss. As you might know, as you do know, I've written a book about consular work, and in the end, this sense that kind of work, the work in stepping forward and supporting Australians overseas, is somehow something the janitor does, and unimportant. That really is old think, and I recognise it from a long, long time ago. The world has changed, and I think people understand that is a key area of responsibility for government.
Good point to make. Ian Kemish, always great to have you on. Thank you so much.